Hey, this is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we're going to pick up with Unit 14, The Rise of Modern America, and pick up with lesson number 5, Domestic Challenges During the Bush Years. Now, we told you that Bush did not win, George W. Bush did not win the popular vote, but one of the things that he did do is he answers the bell when the United States of America comes under attack in 9/11, and even though he doesn't win the popular vote, he becomes America's president when he issues his response to what happens. But there will be some issues now. There will be some domestic issues, of course, that are going to cause him some, his presidency, of course, to take a little bit of a hit. But for the most part, Americans look at him, in a different way after 9/11. Now, we have two unit focus questions that we will look at here. We won't answer those questions today, but what we will do, of course, at the end of the unit, we will go ahead and answer them at that time. But they're there to guide our thinking as we go through this particular unit. How has globalization affected the development of modern America? And 2, how has grievance affected the American political landscape? Well, we'll start by looking at vocabulary, though. And what we want you to do is take out your journals, write down these terms, define them on your own, and as they come up in the lesson, we'll try to address as many of them as we can when we see them. What we also want to do is we have 2 unit or lesson focus questions, and the basis of these lesson focus questions is to guide our discussion as we go through and look at lesson number 5, Domestic Challenges During the Bush Years. Journal topic. So with the For I Do Now activity, go ahead and take out your journals, write down the topic that you see. It said, should there be established rules of treatment for detainees suspected of committing or plotting terrorist acts against the United States? Go ahead and write your response at this time, and we'll talk about it on the other side. I think the easiest way to look at that journal topic is ask yourself a question. Does the United States of America or any nation have the responsibility of ensuring or protecting someone's rights if they commit acts of terror against innocent or civilian populations of those nations? Well, when you think about it, we have some rules that we've established, of course, for conduct in war. But do those rules, of course, apply to people who commit acts of terror? And we're going to find that that's going to be a question that a lot of people in contemporary America are going to try to answer. And there are going to be some people, of course, that fall on both sides of it. So when we look at these people, of course, that are detained, should they be afforded the same rights, of course, of other accused people? And that's going to be a question that the Bush administration is going to have to answer at some point. All right, we're going to look at security versus civil liberty. And that gets back to that journal topic or that do now activity. How much responsibility do we have here to provide civil liberties when it comes to our security as citizens? After winning the election in 2004, Bush believed that he had a mandate to enact his agenda, which included detaining captured terrorists at Guantanamo Bay, where they were subject to poor treatment and even torture, like waterboarding. Waterboarding, we'll show you a picture of what that looks like in a few minutes, but this was an act of, a lot of people seem to think it was an act of terror. The Bush administration and some of the people in the Bush administration believed that it was warranted. Detainees were denied the right to a trial, but did receive the right to habeas corpus after the Supreme Court intervention in Boumediene versus Bush in 2008. We're going to find that some of those detainees who were in Guantanamo Bay for months or years at a time, without even being charged. So what this particular court case does is that they are finally given a writ of habeas corpus where they have to be charged and brought before a judge or released. The Bush administration's use of the Patriot Act also caused some concern over the violation of civil liberties, as wiretaps between the United States and overseas were intercepted if they were deemed suspicious. These wiretaps were declared unconstitutional by the federal judge in 2006, which was overturned by an appeals court a year later. In other words, this here. Does the government have the right to listen in on conversations between American citizens and people overseas to determine whether or not they are a terrorist threat? Once again, these are questions that the Bush administration has to be held accountable for. And we're going to find that in the case of the use of wiretaps in 2006, it was declared unconstitutional But later it was overturned in 2007, saying that it possibly, was all right. Bush's second term struggles. What were some of the issues that Bush faced as president of the United States of America that caused people, of course, to have a little pause about his presidency? Privatizing some of Social Security was one of Bush's goals for his second term. That never happened. What he wanted to do was propose a 4% tax on citizens' income to be placed in a private account. The plan never reached Congress for consideration, but Bush was able to create a prescription drug plan for seniors that did make it to the Congress and was approved. Allegations of torture at Guantanamo Bay caused Bush administration to receive increased criticism. Hurricane Katrina on August 29, 2005, one of the worst natural disasters in the history of the country, caused the Bush administration the most scrutiny as the government's response was characterized as being inept, which means not very good, chaotic, and $200 billion in aid was eventually authorized for the New Orleans and Gulf Coast, but it was later than it should have gotten there. At least that's what a lot of people seem to think, that they didn't respond quick enough. All right, on the left you see a picture of, it says waterboarding from the Inquisition to Guantanamo Bay, and you'll notice over here they have water, of course, that's been pouring down this poor soul's throat, and then over here, this is what they vision what was happening, of course, in Guantanamo, waterboard. Here's a symbol of the Katrina cross. If you are old enough that you remember when they started going through and cleaning out New Orleans, they would put these crosses on the building to indicate a couple things. On the left over there, in that quadrant over there, what it was about was who cleared the house, who went and made sure that everything was the way it should have been. And then at the top, they gave the date, and on the right, whether or not there was any kind of hazards there, rats, gas on, or something like that. And down at the bottom was the one that most people in America, of course, they were looking at was the number of live victims found in the house or the number of dead victims found in the house. And that was usually in this lowest quadrant right here. Here's a picture of New Orleans underwater during Hurricane Katrina. And then you see the Katrina cross over here. It was cleared on 9/20. There were no hazards here. And then there were nobody in the house. And then the fire department is probably who cleared it. In 2005, President Bush was able to appoint two conservative justices to the Supreme Court, John Roberts and Samuel Alito, confirming the conservative slant to the court. Despite Bush's success with the Supreme Court, his Republican Party lost control of the House of Representatives and the Senate in the midterm elections of 2006, and the Democrats assumed the majority with Nancy Pelosi as the first female Speaker of the House. Bush entered the presidency with a budget surplus, and by the time he left office, it was mired in a recession and a financial crisis that would be inherited by the Obama administration when he becomes president in 2008. Here's a picture of John Roberts and Samuel Alito, two Bush-appointed Supreme Court justices. And what they did, of course, is they slanted, of course, the Supreme Court even further in the conservative direction. Here's Nancy Pelosi, becomes the first female Speaker of the House of Representatives. That's the focus question that guided our discussion. How did the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan affect American civil liberties during the Bush presidency? And what were the successes and failures of the Bush presidency? Well, when it comes to civil liberties, the Patriot Act allowed the government to wiretap, surveil, access financial records, and monitor earnings without a warrant. B, racial and religious profiling increased. Domestic and foreigners suspected of terrorism could be held without charges. Enhanced interrogation techniques were utilized, like waterboarding. Guantanamo Bay became a holding center for suspected terrorists. So these things, of course, come out during the Bush presidency, and they attacked civil liberties with some of these things. What were the successes and failures of the Bush administration? Well, the successes were good successes. His response to 9/11 and the creation of Homeland Security was excellent. A healthcare initiative to prevent the spread of AIDS, HIV globally with President Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR. Now, when you're looking at that particular program, this is one of the first times that the federal government steps out and, of course, does something to help with the AIDS crisis. No Child Left Behind. The education initiative was passed. Marginal economic growth did occur. Failures. Handling of Hurricane Katrina, the failure to find the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, the 2008 financial crisis, and allegations of torture at Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib. These were some of the seen as challenges or failures of the Bush administration. All right, what we try to do, of course, is give you some insights in terms of the challenges that President Bush faced during his second term, and also to give you some insights in terms of how the country changes with the creation of the Patriot Act and then the creation of Homeland Security. And a lot of people would argue that these things were necessary to protect Americans, of course, from another event like 9/11. And there are people on the other side that said it was intrusive and it was something, of course, that shouldn't happen. So we have people that fall on both sides of that particular argument. This is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. And do what we always tell you. Make sure you do your own research, draw your own conclusions, and with that, we'll see you next time.